Your elected officials are about to once again face a true hardline. The possibility of shutting down the federal government again in the battle against Planned Parenthood this time. A fight that isn't new, but has caught new fire in recent weeks. As Planned Parenthood fights for its existence, what is most interesting is the number of people who were once deeply involved with the organization, but after a short time saw things that left them uneasy and doing a 180 in their opinions on abortion and what the organization does. The truth about defending and defunding is much more complicated than just cutting off the flow of money. And the impact on those barely making a living would be traumatic and even traumatic. Our guest was once a board member of Planned Parenthood in New York City and then Los Angeles. Now she is a staunch pro-life advocate and author. Welcome, Dr. Verne Tolbert, to the Hardline. Doctor, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you, and I'd like to make just one slight correction.
Please.
I was a board member in New York City from 1975 to 1980 before I relocated to Los Angeles.
Were you involved in any of the Los Angeles clinics when you went there, or had you already left Planned Parenthood by the time you were out of New York?
I had already resigned when I left New York.
Okay, thank you.
And that was the second time I resigned. The first time I almost resigned was when I learned that Planned Parenthood required death certificates. Actually, the Department of Health in New York City required a death certificate for every abortion that was performed while I was on the board. And I thought, death certificates? Well, a death certificate is only required if somebody dies. And so the information that I had learned that it was just a blob of tissue, a mass in the uterus, was not true. Later on, as I began to read as a board member how abortions were performed, I protested that this was traumatic for the mother and her baby. But I was corrected and told it is not traumatic.
Let me then talk about, in light of what you learned and in light of what you just saw, it lends credence to this argument. I want to go first of all and let you listen to this. I'm sure you probably heard it. This is Jeb Bush, who has vowed to cut off federal funding for Planned Parenthood if he is elected to the White House. Here's what he said.
You could take dollar for dollar, although I'm not sure we need $500 million for women's health issues. But if you took dollar for dollar, there are many extraordinarily fine organizations, community health organizations that exist, federally sponsored community health organizations to provide quality care for women on a wide variety of health issues.
Now, Dr. Tolbert, he walked that back after he said it, and he got slammed pretty hard by a lot of people. But there are those people saying that, in essence, he is correct, and there are other organizations, other groups that can pick up the slack for those who use Planned Parenthood right now if it is defunded. But there are others who say that's simply not the case. It's impossible. Where do you stand?
There is no way to justify continuing to fund Planned Parenthood. Its roots are racist. Planned Parenthood was established in 1969 as a subcontracted agency by the government to provide abortions for women who live in the inner city. In other words, Planned Parenthood targets minorities for abortions with the specific goal of keeping down the birth rate of black babies.
But then let's look towards that as well, because I really would like you to answer this one question here, and that is those who say that if Planned Parenthood is defunded, those low-income groups, all these people in America, will have no place else to go, and they can't get any of the services that they currently get through Planned Parenthood. I would imagine that you disagree with that statement.
I disagree. Since when is tearing a baby apart in his or her mother's womb health care? This is not health care. This is barbaric. This is murder. There are other options for women to get pap smears, STD testing, whatever they need. Planned Parenthood facilities are specifically to provide abortions. That is their main goal. To couch it in the terms of health care and that they're providing other resources is just a cover, because their main goal is to keep blacks from populating.
But let me get to you this, because I have in front of me a study that shows that abortions are only 3% of Planned Parenthood's services. You're saying that that's incorrect?
That 3% represents a very large number. Millions of babies, over 20 million African American babies have been aborted. And so when we say 3%, we're talking a lot of babies.
How do we then, I've only got about 40 seconds left, how do we then fix it, and how do we create it so that women, African American women, women of all colors and sizes and ages, can get the health services that they need without Planned Parenthood? What do we do?
There are other community health centers in our neighborhoods. There are hospitals with, there are many other resources available to women other than Planned Parenthood. But Planned Parenthood is receiving the bulk of the funding, the bulk of the resources, and therefore they are the primary funders or providers in our communities. Unfortunately, their goal and their objective is not really health care, as we call health care.
10 seconds left, then. Would you say that the people at Planned Parenthood are all just liars?
No, I would say many of them are misinformed. Many of those who work for Planned Parenthood have a good intention. They don't really understand the background, Margaret Sanger, the Commission on Population Growth and the American Future, or the roots of why the federal government hired Planned Parenthood in the first place.
And
they're unaware of this.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we are going to have you back to dig a little bit deeper into that as well. Dr. Verne Tolbert, thank you so much for joining us. The Hardline continues.